Now that we've modeled our data, the next thing that we're going to start doing is we're going to start using our data set and actually building out some data visuals that help us understand the story of this Austin Housing Insights data set. So, we're going to be looking for things like, what are average home prices around different parts of the Austin, Texas area? What are the average property sizes of some of these areas? Maybe looking into what are some features of these different properties that maybe drive up or are correlated with higher house prices, things like that. But before we start actually visualizing any data, I want to walk you through something that I always do when setting up my Power BI report environment. And honestly, this is something that even though I do tons and tons of Power BI tutorials, this is something that I often forget to tell my students to do. So I just want to go ahead and make sure that we get this knocked out of the way first thing. So maybe your Power BI report is already set up for this, especially if you're using a version of Power BI or if you're using a template or something. Maybe you don't need to worry about this, but this is easy to check for. One of the default settings in Power BI that I personally cannot stand is the cross-highlighting default functionality of data visuals. In other words, let's go ahead and just make a quick data visual here. And I'm just going to grab a couple of fields from my data set. Let's go ahead and make this a bar chart, drag this from legend to x-axis. Cross-highlighting is when we have two visuals in our report and we're trying to filter the second visual based on a selection in the first. So you'll notice over here when I select condo, notice that suddenly my single family up here and all of my other colors that are harder to see are suddenly a lighter blue. And condo has the same kind of dark blue here. And notice I'll do it one more time. If I unselect this and then select single family, suddenly single family is the only thing that stands out. But what's happening is that the second visual is not really being filtered. It's just being highlighted based on my selection over here. I personally don't like this setting in Power BI. I always change this. All you have to do is go to File, go to Options and Settings, click on Options, wait for the window to come up, and go to your local report settings. And we're going to click this box here under Visual Options that changes our default visual interactions from cross-highlighting to cross-filtering. And once that is checked, we're just going to hit OK. And now notice what happens when I select something over here. It filters the other visual down to single family instead of just highlighting it. Let's go ahead and click on single family again. I'm going to click on condo, and now you can see that condo is selected over here. And this even works in both directions. If I select over here, now condo is selected over here. This is how I prefer to set up all of my Power BI reports. I never use cross-highlighting. I've been building Power BI reports for almost a decade, and I've never used cross-highlighting. So just wanted you to know going in how to find the very, very simple toggle to enable cross-filtering versus cross-highlighting. Now, let's go ahead and delete those two visuals, and let's go ahead and start setting up the bones of our report. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a page that, let's just call this Austin Housing Data Insights. And this is going to be our main report page. Later on in this tutorial, I'm going to use bookmarks to show you how to sort of flip through different views, but we're really going to be keeping all of our data visuals just on a single page. This is the only page that our users are going to see. However, just to keep everything sort of organized, I am going to build out several other pages that are just going to be sort of where we stage all of our data visuals. And I've done this in similar ways in other lessons, other tutorials. These are just going to be sort of sandbox pages where we build all of the visuals that we have in mind that sort of share a common theme. So the first page here that I'm going to build out is just going to be sort of summary insights. So for our summary insights, what we're really looking for is just trying to summarize at a very high level a lot of these numerical values that are in our housing fact table. We're not going to delve too deep into things like specific locations or schools. We might do a little bit with some features here, but by and large, we're going to keep everything at an extremely high level here. So the first thing that I'm going to do, since we're going to need to write a little bit of DAX in this lesson is let's just go ahead and add a custom empty table here. And all I did was I just went up here to my toolbar, grabbed this icon here that looks like a table with a plus sign where you can manually or free text enter any data that you have. And I'm just going to load this as is with no data in it. It's going to take a second. My table's going to appear over here on the right at the very bottom. And I'm just going to rename this. We'll call this underscore measures. That's going to, putting an underscore is going to bring that to the top here where I like to have it. And then I'm going to go ahead and create my first measure here. And this is going to be called property count. And this is just going to be a count of all of our ZP IDs from our fact table. And then I'm just going to hide column 1, and that's going to transform this into a measure table, which is indicated by this calculator icon instead of the little like hashtag or sort of table logo that you have for all of your other tables. So I've got a measure table here. I've got my property count. Let's just go ahead and make sure that this is formatted correctly. As you can see here, if I turn this into a card and go to my callout value and specify that I want to show everything, currently there's no comma here, so let's just go ahead and format that. I want to make sure that I'm showing a comma. The next thing that I'm going to do is let's go ahead and create another measure, and we're just going to call this one average house price. And let's go ahead and just grab our latest price measure. This should be formatted with a comma, and it is, but it's not in the currency format that I'm looking for. So there we go. Let's go ahead and set the decimal places here to 0. You may have noticed that I had all these trailing decimal places. I'm good just rounding this up to the dollar. And for now, we're just going to stick with those two, very basic measures here. We'll kind of build the rest as we go. The first visual that I'm going to add to this report page is just going to be the new card visual. So for this one, we don't want to use the card up here in roughly the middle of our visualizations options. We want to grab the one down here that says new, because this is a newer Power BI visual, and it's got the little lightning bolt here, which I guess makes it better. I don't know. You'd have to ask Microsoft what the lightning bolt's all about. But anyway, let's go ahead and just make this, roughly like so in terms of size. Don't be, too worried about how big it is. We're going to resize it as we go. And we're going to add our property count to this as the first measure. And there it is over there. You can see property count got added to the data attributes of the new card visual. Then we're going to go over here to our formatting options. And let's go ahead and drop down our callout value, which is the 15K here. We're definitely not going to need 45-point sizing. I'm going to drop this down to just about 30, and you can see it's much smaller now. And I also want to display all of my units, meaning that instead of just showing 15K, I want to show the full 15,171 property count. And I'm also going to very quickly just change my, there it is, my label. Let's change that from the Segway UI to DIN. And I'm going to increase this to, let's try 14. Next, I'm going to add a card for my latest price. And I'm actually not going to use the average house price measure that I created here, because the thought occurred to me that since we are, and let me just go ahead and add this real quickly, latest price, let's make sure that this is formatted correctly. The thought occurred to me that since we're dealing with home prices, there's probably a lot of outliers in this data set. We can go, just take a glance at our data to confirm some of this. But, if I think about my own neighborhood here in Bowling Green, Kentucky, yeah, there are probably a lot of houses, under 500K USD, of course. But if I sort by descending, there's probably also a fair number of houses in any given metropolitan area that are quite a bit higher than what you might expect reasonably the average home price to be. Here's a $13.5 million home. Here's a $13 million home and a house that is almost $13 million. So I'm starting to worry a little bit about whether average is the best measure to use to be representative of home prices in the Austin, Texas area. So I'm actually making up my mind here instead to show the median home price, which is $405,000. That sounds pretty reasonable to me. And let's go ahead and update this to median, not median, median home price. And then I'm going to get a little bit fancy here with the brand new card measure visual capabilities. Let's go up here to our options for our visual, and let's open up reference labels, which is a really, really cool new addition to our brand new card in Power BI. And where I want to add these new reference labels is not under my property count, but under my median home price. So I'm going to select median home price as my series, and I'm going to add some additional measures for these labels. So let me just go ahead and grab a latest price. I'm just going to add it. And it's only going to let me add it once until I make a selection here. But for now, let's go ahead and grab average as my summary level. So I changed this aggregation to average. Let's go ahead and grab latest price one more time. Now it's letting me add it. Let's change the aggregation here to max. And let's do this one more time and change the aggregation to minimum. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And you can see up here what's happening. I've got my average of latest price, my max of latest price, and my min of latest price. And what I'm going to do now is, so let me back up. The only thing that I'm trying to do here is below my median home price, I'm giving, somebody who's looking at this report some additional information about housing prices, including the average housing price, which you can see is, more than $100,000 higher than my median, probably being pulled up by some of those outliers. And I've also got the most expensive house in my data set and the least expensive house in my data set. So let's go ahead and use DIN as all of our fonts here. I'm going to go ahead and increase that. Looks like my values also need to be changed here. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to make sure that all of my values are showing correctly. So let's start by selecting our average of latest price. It gives me the option to select a label. Let's start by formatting the very first option here. And what I want to do first is for the title, I don't want to use average of latest price, which is just the title that Power BI generated automatically. What I want to do is come up with a custom title, and we'll call this average home price, and I'm going to put a colon at the end of that. Then I'm going to scroll down to my value, and it's recognizing that I've got some kind of currency value here. So it's asking me, how do I want to display this? And I'm going to pick none, and I'm going to pick 0 decimal places. Then I'm going to do exactly the same thing for my other values here. So let's go ahead and select max of latest price. I'm going to create a custom title, and I'm going to call this most expensive home, colon. And I'm going to say I want to show everything, and I want to make sure there are no decimal places, which no problem. It's not showing any anyway, but just want to be as thorough as possible. And for min of latest price, let's give that a custom title of least expensive home. And we're going to set the display units to none, set the decimal places to 0, and now we're good. Now I'm going to add just a couple of additional cards here. Let's go ahead and grab lot size, and actually before lot size, I'm going to put living area square feet. And you can see that for my living area square feet, it looks like I don't have a comma here. Let's go ahead and see if maybe changing this to general and adding a comma. Okay, that seems to have worked. So we've got our sum of living area square footage. That doesn't make a lot of sense. That's just telling us the total living area for all houses in Austin. What I really want here is let's do median again. Just like with home prices, maybe you have some houses that have extremely large lots, and that could definitely throw off our average of living area square feet if we have like huge outliers, maybe some gigantic properties or something. So we're going to just leave this as median. And I'm also going to use median for my lot size instead of average for the exact same reason that there could be some really significant outliers for all I know. For lot size, I also want to go ahead and just drop my decimal places. Let's go ahead and make this general again. And okay, there we go. Just trying to get rid of those zeros at the end. Now we've got what I wanted. Now we're going to go back here to our reference labels. And let's go ahead, and currently we are set to average home price. Let's go ahead and flip this over to median of living area. And let's go ahead and add living area. I'm going to grab my average. Let's add living area one more time. I'm going to grab my maximum and living area a final time. And I'm going to grab my minimum. And we're just going to go through super quickly, and we're just going to edit all of these real fast. And so the first one that I'm going to edit is average living area. Let's give this a custom title of average living area. And it might be helpful to let people know that this is in square feet. Since I'm running out of room here, I am actually just going to kind of leave this as is here. In fact, I've got so little that let's try this as our shorthand. Now let's go ahead and flip this over to max and largest living area and smallest living area. That's looking pretty good to me. Let's go ahead now and select our lot size series, and we're going to grab lot size. I'm going to pull the average, the maximum, and the minimum. And it looks like there are some truly gigantic lots here. So this first one, let's just call this average lot size. This is square feet again. For our max, we'll call this largest lot. And the largest lot is almost 2 billion square feet. Whoops. Change that back to custom. And now let's grab our minimum. We're going to call this smallest lot, which is only 100 square feet. So it looks like our lot sizes are all over the place, which is all the more reason to use median instead of average here. And this is looking pretty good. I'm going to kind of stretch this out a little bit more here. We're not going to do a whole lot of formatting just yet, but let's go ahead very quickly and let's change our layout. I'm going to reduce the space between my cards a little bit. Going to make sure that all of my text is vertically aligned. In other words, it's going to sort of hug the top of the card. My callout value should be fine. Let's go to my cards here real quickly and let's see what narrow looks like. I think I like that pretty well. And now for my reference labels, let's turn this back to all so that we can update the layout of just the reference area here at the bottom. I want to look at it without a divider. I think I like it better maybe with the divider. Let's change our layout. Actually, our spacing is where these options are. And I'm just reducing the padding a little bit at a time. I'm trying to make this as narrow as possible because this thing takes up a lot of room and I want to make sure that I have plenty of room to play with my other visuals. Okay, that's looking pretty good for now. The other thing that I'm realizing that I forgot to do is to update my fonts for the other two reference label areas to DIN. So let's just go back real quickly and take care of that. First, I need to go to my median living area. And I need to click on average. Let's make sure that we've got DIN selected for both of these. Then I want to go to my max and make sure I've got DIN selected for my value and my title. Then we'll go to min and do the same thing. I know that updating our fonts is a little bit tedious. I probably could have saved us some time. if I had, built a template or something beforehand with all of these fonts sort of set to DIN right out of the gate, but no problem. This doesn't take all that long to fix. There we go. I lost for a second where my other ones were. I could tell that I still had some under lot size that were not segue, or that were still segue. Okay, there we go. Everything is now updated, and the card visual doesn't take up that much space. The last thing that I'm noticing is we want to go up here to our titles for these measures, and let's just update those real quickly. So we're going to call this median living area. If you want to use the square feet nomenclature too, just to make sure that people always remember that this is square footage that we're looking at. And there we go. So now we've got our new card visual. Now we want to focus on populating the space down here with some additional visuals. I would recommend that you leave yourself some space at the top and some space here at the side, because we are going to be adding some additional visual elements and controls to our report when we start sort of designing our theme and our layout for the report. For the next series of visuals, we're just going to populate this space with some, probably bar charts, if I'm being completely honest, maybe an odd line chart. This isn't really a time series data set, so we're probably not going to be building a line chart. I'm not anticipating that. But since we do have a lot of geographic data in this, I might also present like a high level map of some sort, just sort of showing, where a lot of the homes in the Austin area are located that are for sale in this data set. So first, let's go ahead and just grab a bar chart. Don't really have a specific plan yet for this bar chart, but it's probably going to take up about this much space. I'm kind of thinking with the space that I have here, if I could fit maybe 3 charts up here and maybe, 2 or 3 at the bottom. I don't want to get too carried away, but I definitely want to make sure that I'm, making the most out of the data set that I have. Let's go ahead and grab our home type from our house attributes, and let's go ahead and grab our property count. And this at least sort of shows us, that the vast majority of homes in this data set are single family homes. So, if we want to, we can also add our property count down here to our tooltips and show this value as a % of grand total if we want our users to have the ability to hover and see, okay, single family, there are 14,241 properties, and those make up 94% of the 15,171 that we have up here. So that might be useful. I'm going to keep that visual, but I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller here. Let's go ahead and go over to our options. Anyone who has watched any of my tutorials knows that I hate a common setting on these data visuals that causes these warning signs to trigger, and that is the responsive setting on this bar chart. So let's go to our general properties. Let's drop down our advanced options and turn off the responsive setting. All this is going to do is it's going to force all of the fonts and formatting changes that we make to sort of it's going to put us in control instead of letting Power BI sort of manipulate the font size on its own based on how large we've made the visual. So first we're going to go to our Y-axis settings. Let's turn off the home type title, not feeling like I really need that. And let's go ahead and make the maximum width as large as we can get it so that none of our values on our Y-axis get cut off. Next, you'll notice that I've got kind of a scroll thing happening here. That's because a big chunk of the bottom of this visual is being taken up by my X-axis labels. So I'm actually going to go to my X-axis and I'm going to turn off my values and turn off my property counts. And that's going to allow me to probably be able to fit most of this on here. Now, because we turned off our X-axis, people need some kind of way to be able to decipher, what these values are. So let's turn on our data labels. I'm going to use DIN as my font. I'm going to pump that up to about 10, and I'm going to use none. as my display unit cap. So now we can see 14,241, 470, 174. That's looking pretty good to me. While we're here, let's go back to our y-axis settings. I like to use DIN as my font just because it's very readable. And that's all looking pretty good. Next, let's go up here to our title. And let's just call this visual number of properties, let's see, available by home type. And if you want to italicize it or something just to sort of, set it off from other text on the page, that's totally fine. Next, I'm going to just copy this visual to sort of give me some baseline formatting to work with. And I'm going to use let's use, kind of going back and forth here, a line and clustered column chart ought to be pretty good for where I want to take this. And I'm going to get rid of property count here, and I'm actually going to I'm going to go ahead and create a visual for median home value since we've been using this a little bit. Median home price and value are not the same thing, which is why I went back from calling this value. Let's change this to home price. And latest price is what we want to use from our fact table. Let's go ahead and drop that into our y-axis settings. That's looking right to me. I'm noticing that I've got no commas or dollar sign here, so let's go ahead and format that as a currency. And I'm actually going to turn off my data labels here because I'm going to do something else with this. And let's go back to my x-axis settings, and you can see my height is totally maxed out. That's kind of a problem for me because I have some long values here like multiple occupancy and mobile manufactured. Let's drop this down to about 35. Actually, I'm going to drop it down even to 25. I didn't get quite the change that I was hoping for. That's looking pretty good to me. Now let's go ahead, and I want to add one more thing here. And this is, I'm trying to visualize something that I thought off the top of my head might be kind of cool to look at is any, home types that have a significant difference between the median home value and the average home value. So let's go ahead and drop average home value into my y-axis settings, and immediately you see a huge spike here for vacant land. Median home price $350,000, average home price $785,000. And I'm going to get rid of the line here because lines in data visualization imply some kind of continuity. But it doesn't matter what order these are in. The continuities, the order of the line values is kind of irrelevant. So let's turn the line off by dropping the stroke width under lines. Let's just drop that down to 0. And I'm going to add markers here. And then what I want to do is something that I kind of have in mind to, I could just leave this visual as is, but I'm trying to kind of visually help users make the connection between the delta here. So let's go over to this magnifying glass, and I'm going to add some error bars here. So I'm going to enable my error bars, and let's go ahead and grab my median home rate as the lower bound. And if you want to, you can add average home to the upper bound. It doesn't really matter in this specific example. I've already got what I wanted. Kind of on the fence. I think I'm just going to leave it out. Now I've got the line sort of connecting the top of my median home rate bars to the dot that represents my average home price. So let's drop down here. I'm going to go ahead and play with my bar settings a little bit. Let's get rid of the marker shape. Let's go ahead and just change that to a dot instead of the little hyphen. And I think I'm going to make that just a little bit smaller here. Actually, I think I'm just going to get rid of it entirely. I think that looks a little bit better because honestly, the average home price is the only marker that I'm really all that concerned about. So, and then I'm just going to kind of make this gray. Let's head back over here to my marker settings. And for now, I'm just going to leave this kind of gray as well. Okay, It's not perfect, but again, like we're going to be playing with the colors when I come back to this. So for now, I'm just trying to kind of get my ideas down, almost like I'm doing a rough draft of a painting or something. Just want to keep it simple, just want to get my ideas down there, and then I'll come back through on my next pass and just clean everything up and make it look a little bit better. Next, let's go ahead and add a small map over to this area. We're not focusing on geographic data yet. We're just keeping things very, very summarized here. I'm going to use my property count again for my bubble sizes. And I'm going to use from my location values, I'm going to use my zip codes as my location. And you can see, I've already got some bubbles popping up here. Can't really get much closer than that. Let's go ahead now and change our bubble sizes. Let's try -20. Ooh, that's pretty small. Let's try -15. Okay, that's a little bit better. I'm honestly not sure that I need to change all that much. Again, don't try to recreate everything that I'm doing exactly. Have fun, play around a little bit, watch what I'm doing, and then once you think it looks, good, or once you think the right areas are sort of highlighted, and noticeable, that's fine. One thing that I think does help when you're dealing with sort of bubble maps here is using a gradient, kind of like a heat map, to make it a little bit easier to sort of spot where the hot marks are. So it looks like, for example, there are a lot of houses for sale kind of, maybe slightly southwest of Austin. So this area seems to contain a lot of properties. This zip code 78745 and 78748. So that might be interesting to somebody who knows Austin much better than I do. It doesn't mean anything to me. Next, one thing that I like to do is, when dealing with some of the maps in Power BI, sometimes things like, rivers, which you see here, or green areas, which could be like parks or forests, and interstates and roads, they create additional noise in a data visual that you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about if you were just building a regular bar chart or a line chart or something like that. So you might also play around with using the grayscale version of the map or even the light version of the map. I often kind of find myself gravitating towards grayscale because it sort of minimalizes the impact of geographic features within the map and really allows the data to sort of jump forward. So I think I'm just going to leave it grayscale for now, honestly. And let's go ahead, and one thing that I forgot to do on this chart is add a title. So let's go ahead and drop back over here, and we'll call this difference between median and average home price by type. And we'll call this number of properties by zip code. And you can see I'm already running out of space here. I mean, the card visual at the top is useful, but it does take up a lot of room. So let's just go ahead and add, one more small bar chart down here that I think could be interesting. And in fact, I'm going to cherry pick again and copy this, so I already have some formatting. Let's go ahead and get rid of home type, and let's use year built instead. And what this bar chart does is it kind of gives us an idea of the age of houses that are for sale right now in the Austin, Texas area. I was kind of expecting to see more newer houses, but you can see that it looks like a lot of the homes that are for sale are about a decade old to 20 years old to, almost 40 years old. So, maybe there's some kind of cyclicality happening. Maybe, people like to sell their homes, in like 10-year increments or something. I just think it's kind of interesting that around, the decade mark, we're seeing some spikes here. But for this visual, I think I'm just going to call this number of properties available by build year. And the last chart that I have in mind here is going to require us to hop back over to the Power Query editor. It might be interesting to give the user the ability to sort of, take a chart like this. And I'm just going to put this here as a placeholder. But use this to compare like what percentage of homes in the Austin, Texas area have a homeowners association, have cooling, have a garage, have heating, have a spa, have view. And, of course, the problem is that I don't have just one value here. I have all kinds of things. So how do I, create that visual when currently my information resides in multiple columns? Well, it's actually pretty easy. Let's go ahead and just pop back over to the Power Query editor. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take that features table that we created that has 39 rows, and we're just going to reference this. And we can call this new table that we're creating, we'll call it features pivot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab everything except for my feature key. And this is kind of similar to the exercise that we did with our descriptions, right? I'm going to grab everything but my feature key, and then I'm going to transform this table by unpivoting all of those columns. Now we have the field that we want to put on the y-axis of our bar chart. This is going to tell us, and I'll try to minimize this as well as I can so that you can see what I'm talking about. We're going to use this column, or technically a variation on it, for the y-axis over here, and we're going to basically roll up all of the items for has association that are yes, all of the values for has cooling that are yes, has garage, etc., so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and the first thing that I want to do is I want to kind of reformat this, because I would really like to have a space between has association, has cooling, has garage. I want to make sure that this is as readable as possible. So while we're here, let's go ahead and just split this column. And instead of using a comma or a space for our split delimiter, we're going to use the word has for our delimiter. And so you'll see that when I hit OK, it splits out everything that comes after the has. So now I can just get rid of attribute 1. I'm actually not going to need that anymore. And now we're left with association, cooling, garage, heating, spa, view. The next part's super easy. We're just going to format the values in this field, but we're going to add a prefix. And the prefix that we're going to add is capital H, AS with a space. Now we have has association, has cooling, has garage. It doesn't really matter what you call this. We can call it attribute if you want to. And value is just the response, yes or no, for all of these items for each property. So let's just go ahead and hit close and apply. We'll wait for this to load. Once this is done, we're definitely going to have to pop back over and see, okay, because you can see it actually did build the wrong connection for what I was looking for. I'm going to go ahead and delete this relationship, and I'm going to grab my features pivot over here, and I'm going to manually drag my feature key over onto the feature key of my housing fact table. And I'm getting what looks like an error, but honestly, this is fine for what we're doing. And it's saying that I have a many to many relationship. And this isn't automatically wrong. All it's doing is telling us that for every value in our pivot table, the feature key appears multiple times. And for every value in our housing fact table, the feature key appears multiple times. So we're joining multiple identical values to multiple identical values between these two tables. And that is okay in this specific example that we're going to be building. There are instances where this could give us some finicky results, but not for the visual that we're building. So let's go ahead and hop back over here, and I'm going to grab my features pivot. I'm going to grab my attribute here, and you can see that right now I've got 15,171 for all values, and that looks wrong, right? And that is the nature of the error that I was getting here with that many-to-many relationship. But the way that we're going to get around this, and the reason that it's going to ultimately end up being okay for us, is we're just going to grab our value here, and we're going to drag that into our legend. I'm going to turn this into a 100% stacked bar chart. And now you can see that this is working correctly, because now for every single value here in our chart, we're basically getting what we wanted to, the story that we wanted to tell in the first place. Out of all 15,171 homes that are available, we're able to quickly identify that 53% have homeowners associations. 98% have cooling, which you would hope for, especially in Texas. 55% have a garage. 99% have heating. Maybe a little bit more surprising since it's Texas. 92% do not have a spa, which I can tell you feels right. And it looks like about 23% have, some kind of great view. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on formatting here, but I mean, like one thing that we would want to do with these bars is really pull attention to the yes values instead of the no, so that we can really see, okay, looks like just over half have an HOA. The vast majority have heating and cooling, about half have a garage, almost none have a spa, and a very small percentage have a spectacular view or something of that nature. So we're going to go ahead and change the title of this chart to percentage of properties by feature. And okay, so right now this looks pretty cluttered. We're going to have to do some additional formatting, of course, and making this look pretty. But for now, I've at least got a good number of pretty solid base visuals to use for my summary insights page. And at this point, that's totally all that I want. Again, we're not focused on perfection here. This is just the outline of the masterpiece that we're going to end up making by the end of this tutorial. So our draft is done. Let's go ahead and change our perspective to our next page, which is going to focus on one of our other dimensions or aspects from our housing data set. In this video, we're going to start working with some of the geolocational data in our data set. So it probably makes sense that the first thing we're going to do is just add a map visual, which I'm using. There are several different types of map visuals in Power BI. You have the filled map, you have the shape map, and you even have the relatively newer Microsoft Azure map. But for this one, I'm just going to use the kind of vanilla sounding map visual in Power BI where you can see that we can actually overlay longitudinal and latitudinal data points. And all it's going to do is just kind of drop a pin on the map like so. So let's go ahead and open up our location data. I'm going to grab my longitude, my latitude. And you can see right now by default, it is summing those. We don't want that, so we just want to click on this little down caret here, pick Don't Summarize. And here in just a moment, we're going to start seeing a whole bunch of dots that represent all of the many properties around Austin, Texas that we are including in this data set. So obviously, I'm not going to sit here and count every single one, but we know from our summary insights page that there are about 15,171 points scattered across this map. So, obviously, this is already, pretty cool. I mean, I love geolocational data. It's neat being able to see all of these data points, laid on a map this easily. However, what exactly do we do with this information? I mean, right now it's just a bunch of dots. It's kind of hard to see any specific one. It's kind of hard to glean that much information from this, except for, maybe some of the, less densely populated areas, or areas where you're not really seeing any houses. But, if I were if I were a user just jumping into this report, it's not immediately obvious to me what, if any, takeaways I should leave, just looking at this map, other than, possibly getting a rough sense of the shape of the Austin metropolitan area. But even at that, I'm guessing, I don't really know where this data set stops and begins. Maybe there are some really densely populated areas over here in this empty looking space that were just out of scope for this data set. I have no idea. So what we're going to do is, I was kind of thinking it might be cool to build in some additional functionality that would kind of allow users to, make some changes or select a certain value or variable from our data set and use that to sort of manipulate the color scheme of this map so that it's a little bit easier to see specific items of interest. So what I'm going to do with this map visual first is I'm just going to go ahead and grab my average house price. I'm going to drop that in here for my bubble sizes. And now one thing that I want to point out here is that, yes, this is average house price, but we're not really looking at average house prices here because we have, 15,000 dots here in this visual. So for any given data point, we're really just looking at the price of that house, not the average price, because, there aren't multiple houses clustered into any specific latitude and longitude point here. This is very, very granular data. So even though I'm using average house price, really all I'm trying to do is sort of find, where the lower priced houses are and the higher priced houses. And if you want to, play with your bubble sizes a little bit, just, click on your visual formatting settings. And you can, do something like using the data range to scale the size of the bubbles. And here you can see I've got some super tiny bubbles and I've got some really large bubbles, which, to me is useful for sort of making it visually more obvious where the cheaper houses are. Like here's a $599,000 house. That doesn't sound very cheap to me. But here's a, $3.4 million house and a $13.5 million house. This little data point over here, another almost $600,000 house. So again, I clearly have a different sense of what a cheap house is compared to this data set, but it looks like that means that there must be a fair amount of clustering of data points at around that $600,000 mark. If there are houses that are, in the 300s, 400s, those dots are so small that I'm almost wondering if I'm even seeing them. But I think I'm just going to run with this for now. I was debating whether or not to, manually toggle the size here, but let's just roll with it. We're going to make all of this a little bit easier to digest here in a second. That's kind of the whole point of this video. So we're going to go ahead and just leave our map as is with our bubbles kind of scaled based on house prices. But what I'm going to do is I'm just, to sort of give you an additional weapon for your Power BI and data visualization arsenal. I'm going to show you how to build a slicer that's going to allow you to dynamically change the colors of these dots based on the range of prices that you have selected. And in order to do this, we're going to use a parameter, and it's just the easiest way to do this. You can absolutely do this manually using DAX and configure it that way, but I just find it easier to go to modeling. Let's create a new parameter. I'm not creating a field parameter. I do a lot of these in my videos. Very rarely do I demonstrate how to use the numeric range parameter, but this is actually the one that we're going to be using. So before I do that, just to kind of show you, how my brain is working here, I'm going to go ahead and drop a slicer into the report here based on our price field from our data set. Let's go ahead and make this a slicer. I'm just going to scale it like so. Let's go to our general settings over here in our visualizations. Let's drop down our advanced options and our properties. Let's turn off responsive. And if you want to punch up the font sizes a little bit, I always use DIN for almost everything. Let's go with 12-point font. Let's make the title 13. And I'm just going to call this home price. And okay, so you can see, based on the values that were put into my slicer here, it starts at 5,500. That means that the lowest price house in my data set is 5,500, pretty obvious. And we already hovered on our most expensive house up here, which is this $13.5 million home. So that's the most expensive one. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of pull this down a little bit. Actually, I need to shrink this slicer quite a bit for something we're going to be doing later on. And what I'm going to do is, knowing what my thresholds are here, let's go ahead and create our numeric range parameter. I'm going to click on that, and it's asking me what I want the minimum and maximum numbers to be here. And so I'm going to set my minimum at 5,500, knowing that that's my lowest price house, and you can probably guess what I'm going to set the maximum at, 13,500, or 13,500,000. Think I got it? Good. Okay, and for increments, we probably don't want to use one. I'm going to pick a number that is large, but definitely still gives us some precision to play with in our slicer here. And I'm going to keep this checked, our add slicer to this page. So let's try 10,000 unit increments. Let's go ahead and create that. Here's my slicer. Currently, it's not configured the way that I want it to be, but that's fine. I'm just going to go ahead and click on this. Let's go home. Let's grab our format painter, which is extremely helpful for anytime you need a shortcut when copying formatting between common visuals. And I'm just going to copy that here. That's got me set up for what I need. Now I'm going to go ahead and change my slicer settings from single value to between. And you can see that my parameter is not formatted correctly. So let's go ahead and open up my parameter. Let's click on the parameter field. Let's format it as a number. And now we're good to go. While I'm here, I'm also going to go ahead and change the name of my parameter to parameter, and I'm just going to put range in parentheses in case we end up creating other parameters later. It's just going to help me remember what this range is doing. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the measure that was created here for parameter value, and I'm just going to drop this onto the page because currently it's going to be broken because of when I manipulated this parameter slicer here. You can see it showing blank. I want to explain why this is showing blank at the moment. It's fine. We're not even going to be using this measure, but I want you to know why the default measure that was created is blank. That's because it's using the selected value function in DAX. And you can see that it's pointing at the selected value of my parameter field here. And of course, this parameter field is populating this slicer here. Well, currently, the values that I have selected are all numbers ranging from 5,500 to 13,500,000. Not sure exactly why this got cut off. You can see it's not actually going all the way up to 13,500,000, but hey, it's not going to make much of a difference. So the reason this is blank is because currently I have a ton of values selected between my minimum and my maximum here. What I really want from this slicer is I want to know what the minimum value selected is and the maximum value. So let's go ahead and change the name of this to min parameter value, and let's replace selected value with our min function in DAX. And now you can see that I'm showing 5,500. We're going to create another measure, and it's going to be almost the same. Super simple DAX here, and we're going to call this max parameter value. And we're going to grab our parameter again. I'm just copying this for demonstrating purposes here. Going to make sure that both of these are formatted as currency. I am actually going to be using these cards later on. Let's go ahead and just select both of them. I'm going to drop these down. They need to be itty bitty. So let's go ahead and make these just 20-point font. And I do want to make sure that I am showing all values here. I'm just going to drag them down here. All of this will make sense later on when we start prettying up this report. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and put these here like so. Okay. Now that we have this, notice that as I manipulate my parameter slicer here, these values are going to immediately change. They're always going to be telling me what my minimum selected value is here and my maximum selected value. And of course, this is going to be based on my data set that moves in 10,000 unit increments. So you might see things like, right up here, I see 1,687,095. But for my minimum parameter value down here, I see 1,695,500. So there's some rounding happening in my measures here. And the reason for that is that if I go back to my actual parameter here, remember that all of my values are in 10,000 unit increments from when we made this range table. The free text here that generates, or the text here that generates within the slicer that you can manually update if you want to, that can move independently of the 10,000 unit increments. It can get all the way down to the dollar. So just letting you know that you may see sort of a disconnect between the two cards down here and the numbers that are being selected, but that rounding is totally fine. It's within the parameters of our data. Anyway, now that we have that, let's go ahead and focus on creating our color measure that's going to help us, isolate any houses that are lower than our price range here or higher than our max here. So instead of coloring what's in between, you absolutely could do it. For me, I'm just focusing on coloring what is, actually I think I'll do it both ways for you just to show you. I was just going to focus on coloring all of the houses that are below this threshold and higher than this threshold, but we'll do it both ways. I think both could potentially be useful. So let's go ahead and do our first version, and I'm just going to call this property color 1. And we're going to create a switch. You can also use if you want to. The logic's pretty similar here. But we're going to switch when the following condition is true. Basically, anytime my average house price is greater than or equal to my max parameter value, I want to give these bubbles one color. When my average house price is less than or equal to my minimum parameter value, I want to give it another color. And if it falls, in the middle of the range or in the dark gray area here, then I want to give it yet another color. So here I'm going to use just some of the colors from the default template in Power BI. I'll probably change out these colors later. But for now, I'm going to use a hex code for my houses that are at the highest extreme here. I'm going to use kind of an orange color. And for everything that is below my threshold, I'm going to use kind of a blue color, and everything that is in the middle, I don't really care about, so I'm just going to use a light gray color. And now let's go ahead and make sure that our colors here are pointed at the measure that we just created here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my bubble colors. I'm going to use conditional formatting instead of this blue, and this blue should be the same one that we're using in our color measure, and it is. Let's go ahead and open our conditional formatting settings. Let's go ahead and go to field value, and let's select our property color 1. And now you can see I've got some blue, I've got some gray, and I've got some orange for my big houses. So let's go ahead and change the name of this slicer from parameter to house price color. And you can see that as I play with this a little bit, notice that, so right now, I may have a few houses in here that are lower than 425,000, but probably not a whole lot. And they may even be a little bit too small for me to even see. Let's move this up to 566. I'm still not seeing them. Okay, there's at 706, I'm starting to see them. So my lower price houses are still there, but I actually think they're too small to be easily seen because of how Power BI is scaling these bubbles. So I'm going to go back to my map here, and I'm going to see if this works a little bit better using the auto range. Still not seeing some of the bubbles that I think I should be. This could be a problem of not all values currently being shown in the data. In other words, there may just be too many data points for the map to populate. That's fine. We have other ways of sort of scaling this down. So let's go ahead and, okay, there's some blue dots. There we go. So, I've got all of my houses that are, so I've already filtered this to look at just home prices that are between 916,000 and 9,645,000. So I've filtered the map. You can see that I no longer have that indicator showing that I'm not showing all of my data points. And I'm telling Power BI, I want you to color all of the houses that are below. I'm going to drop this down. Let's color all of the houses that are less than 1 million blue, and let's color everything that is greater than 3 million orange. You can see I've got my different colors going here. What I'm going to do next is let's go ahead and flip our colors around. And so I'm going to do, if my average house price is greater than my minimum parameter value and average house price is less than my maximum parameter value, then let's go ahead and color those orange. And if not, let's just color those this kind of very, very light gray color. So now I'm kind of flipping this around. Now I'm only looking at houses that are between 1 million and $3 million. So I only have two colors, gray and orange. Maybe I just want to look at houses that are, let's try 650,000 and 950,000. Oops, 950,000. And let's go ahead and limit my prices here to only show me prices that are less than 1 million. And so you can see I've got quite a lot of options here. I'm going to go back. Let's try our data range scaling again. Not bad. Okay, so all of the orange houses should now be houses that fall in the price range threshold that I set. Let's go ahead while we're here and add yet some more slicers to the page, because maybe there are other house attributes that we're looking for. I'm just going to copy the same slicer a bunch of times. But for the first one, let's go ahead and add a slicer for living area. And the next one will be lot size. And the last one will be year built. Maybe I know that I'm only looking at houses that were built in a certain time frame. And of course, as I'm doing this, Power BI is kind of screwing up the formatting of the slicers. No big deal. Let's just go. I'm just going to control select all of these. Let's go back to our slicer settings and select between. And now I've got more what I had in mind here. So maybe for lot sizes, we know we definitely don't want one that's, oh my gosh, how big is this? Like 1.5 billion square feet. Maybe instead we know we only want, lots that are about 2,000 square feet. And maybe we know for year built, we're really only interested in looking at houses that were built, in this century. And maybe we know for our living area, we want, something between 2,000 and let's say 4,000 square feet. And so now you can see we've got our options here, and it looks like we only have about 3 that are, okay, there are maybe some more here. 4 that perfectly fit what we're looking for. So we've got an $850,000 house, an $809,000 house, and a $750,000 house. I'm actually going to drop my house price color thresholds down to 500,000. Okay. Looks like almost all of the houses on the map meet that criteria. But hey, at least now we've got a rough tool that we can use to kind of invite users to sort of play with the housing information, and find different houses around the Austin, Texas area that sort of fall into these various thresholds. Now that said, we're only looking at the tip of the iceberg here when it comes to all of the slicers that we could have. We still have our features fields over here, or features table, where we could give users the ability to select, whether or not there's a homeowners association, whether or not houses have cooling or garage, etc. We have information about like school districts. All of those would also be totally reasonable things that people might want to slice and dice this data by. So later on in the lesson, we are going to be building a sort of collapsible interactive slicer panel. But for now, these are at least, some core numeric slicers that kind of help users make sense of this map instead of just dropping a map on here and leaving people to sort of, hover over each dot one at a time. This kind of helps people digest, all of this geolocational data much more easily. And, and being able to sort of flag with color the specific dots that maybe, fit their thresholds is also a really, really powerful way of just getting more out of this geolocational data while also creating, a really immersive and sort of aesthetic experience for your potential users that, invites them to play. At the end of the day, for a lot of these reports that we're building, there's a heavy layer of play and sort of like video game-like culture or gamification that we want to make sure that we're paying close attention to as BI developers. It's not just about, showing the data. It's not just about like, building things that look pretty. We want to invite our users to ask more questions and explore this thing, because ultimately it's just going to help educate them on this data and, make them more savvy when it comes to sort of, navigating this data and finding what they're looking for.